Greetings everyone, my name is Buck Business. Konnichiwa, I'm Kawaii Critic, and today we are here to review My Little Pony Season 8, Episode 24, Father Knows Beast. Well, Season 8 has had its reign of bad episodes, and well, Spike was on a run of good episodes. So I guess the curse of bad episodes of Season 8 has finally caught up with Spike and giving him what I can only say is the most disappointing Spike episode we've ever seen on this show. I mean, I think this episode fails on every single level from beginning to end. But before we do begin, we don't have official notes on this, as we did not have time to prep for them. So apologies in advance if anything is out of order, as we'll just be kind of going over what this episode fails at spectacularly in an overall sense. So this episode does begin with some Spiky-kun and Smolder-chan having a little bit of discussion, I believe, if I do remember correctly. And, well, Twilight-san does come into the picture, or they start the episode. I forget which two start the episode. And it does appear that Spiky-kun is sort of feeling a little bit different, feeling something sets him off in the way that, he's like, oh, something about dragon culture, and they bring that up again. Anyways, at some point, a falling dragon drops from the sky, and we see this dragon on the left here. Now, if I am not mistaken, I think this pony is a guest voice actor. He does sound familiar. He sounds like Mr. Krabs. I'm not sure if they share the same voice actor, but a part of me also feels like if that is the person I am thinking about, that they actually may have written this episode based off of the voice actor they got, which is unfamiliar, as most previous episodes haven't really ever done that. So this dragon claims to be Spike's father, and from his complexion of his main color being close to Spike's little side color there, and his top hair color being very close to Spike's main color, well, it's almost to be assumed that yes, this is to be Spike's father, although his behaviors we are able to quickly pinpoint that is quickly not the case. But the episode does drag on to actually make the reveal itself. But however, there is a huge question that ruins this entire episode. Yeah, if they were so unsure, then why not ask Celestia-san about where she got the egg from? That's a huge question that this episode completely misses out on. And by missing such an obvious question, it just feels like this episode didn't think that part through. I mean, that would have solved a huge chunk of this episode's problem, is that you could have had Celestia-san say something as simple as, well, I found the egg, or something, and I actually don't know who your father is. Something along those lines would have helped with the reasonability of Spiky-kun just saying, oh, you're my dad. Dad! Sorry, I have been playing a lot of God of War, so, or as some like to call it, Dad of Boy. Anyways, so this dragon, Spike's acclaimed father, wants to have the castle all to himself, and he's they help him recover because he had fallen previously. So the ponies help him recover first, and it's done through a montage of all the ponies helping out. Pinky-san doing probably the most to actually help in the right way of like, here's food, but always keeping it away. After said recovery, yes, the father claims that he wants to do what the son wants to do, so they do several activities, and in favor, Spike wants to know if the father wants to do anything. But we see that very quickly, as we mentioned, or not so quickly, that he just wants to lounge about the castle as he's trying to claim it as his own territory or slash live there permanently. And again, it brings up back the question of why not just ask Princess Celestia. But nonetheless, probably the most funny moment happens around this point in time where Twilight is sort of starting to question what is happening here. She's starting to grow very suspicious. In a very casual manner, Spike says, "You're not my mother." While the most funniest line in this episode and had us actually laughing legitimately, yeah, it actually doesn't fit any circumstance within the actual episode, and the actual reaction as well also doesn't fit the actual episode. It just seems so like the entire setup of that line did not fit. It didn't fit anything, which is very unfortunate because most of this episode feels like it doesn't fit. Nonetheless, Spiky-kun goes off to hang out with the dad some more, but Smolder-chan is unfortunately is around to clear things up as she's starting to realize that this stuff that he's claiming to do is not very dragon-like at all, apparently. Which I think would be the only good to come out of this episode would to be to say that we've had a lot of things in the past. We had a few episodes in the past where it's like, this is what dragons do. So it's interesting to at least see what dragons don't do. The differentiates between what they do and what they don't do. And it's pretty obvious to make that distinction here. However, that doesn't save this episode from being absolutely terrible. And yes, the two dragons, that being Spike and Smolder, devise a plan to trick the father dragon into finally coming clean by doing what actual dragons would do and leaving the castle for a cave and doing other activities closer to what a dragon would do. It gets to the point where he finally admits that he is not the father, which of course breaks Spike's heart, and the dragon sort of makes off in his way as both Spike and Twilight both apologize to each other, and Spike claims, which this is the worst moral I've ever seen, or one of the worst, is that he would want to drop dragon-like behavior or dragon culture to stay specifically pony-ish, as they refer to it as. And a part of me feels like that's actually very, very wrong. I mean, let's make a comparison, shall we? Let's say, for example, that we are Japanese, but let's say if we were raised to be more Hispanic, for example. So we lived our lives going through Hispanic culture, living in an Hispanic life. We've done so for up to our teenage years, and suddenly a father-esque like figure comes in and he says, you are Japanese as well. Let me show you what it's like to be Japanese. Only to figure out that this person isn't your father, and then you suddenly decide, even though I might actually be half Japanese myself, I'm actually going to completely drop everything that is Japanese culture. Do you see how messed up that actually sounds when you compare it to humans? That's really messed up. And sure, I can see that some of the dragons' cultures are a little bit more aggressive, but earlier on in this very season, we saw Spike taking part in dragon culture. So, them deciding to suddenly shift and back down is a complete slap to everyone's face. I'm sorry, but I think Spike should have been more akin to actually saying, well, maybe I can actually still look into it a little bit. Not, become completely dragon, obviously, but the way that they just say it, it makes it seem like they want Spike to drop dragon culture completely, and I just don't think that's a very good moral at all. And we're going to go over how we think this episode should have been. First and foremost, I think what would have been a lot less upsetting is actually if they properly introduced Spike's true father. That would have not been a disappointment from beginning to end. When we know that it's not Spike's father, there's an immediate disappointment that, oh, this is just some dragon that's up to something very clearly. But to keep in line what this moral is about, while also fixing it simultaneously, is have Spike's father be a lot closer to Spike. His demeanor, his attitude, his behaviors, even some of the cultures like fashions that he follows can be a lot closer to something that seems like to be a pony rather than a dragon. Or his just demeanor, the way he presents himself doesn't seem very dragon. The character I can compare this to is, think of Bambi 2 and think of Bambi's father. Like, very regal, very presentable, but very stern. That sort of very interesting mix. I think that would have been a much better fit to be Spike's true father. And I think what would have made it even more interesting is that if they introduced the idea or slash concept, if Spike's father was actually a dragon lord of a separate clutch of dragons, and the conflict can actually touch upon one of the biggest issues My Little Pony has, which is what I like to call the just talk issue, where a character will be talking and the issue is about to arise, but another character will talk over them and completely, you know, downplay the actual conflict until later on in the episode. This is something My Little Pony has done quite frequently, and it's kind of getting very annoying to see this behavior. It's just so tiring to see happen over and over again. There are several episodes where this is an issue. I mean, one of the other issues that My Little Pony has had in the writing department is subtlety. Again, I'll go into why that's important a little bit later. But again, you could have Spike's father be this very different type of dragon, and he's also a dragon lord, which I think would make a lot of sense. As to why he wouldn't have come around to Ponyville for all this time. He was taking care of his clutch. He was being protective. He was seeing the dragons around him and their behaviors being so different, so, rowdy, so aggressive, and he didn't want that life for Spike. So he sent him to Princess Celestia. That would have made, again, a lot more sense. And, again, you can do the just talk portion justice for once in My Little Pony by having Spike talk to Spike's father, his true father, and the actual, tension can come from Spike actually being angry. This is an emotion we haven't really seen a lot from Spike, is anger. I mean, we've seen him yell from time to time, sure, but we haven't seen him. I don't think we've ever seen him that angry before, and he does it a little bit in this episode, but I think the line, "You're not my mother," could have come from a place of anger and disappointment. You know, he's hearing what his father is saying to him, and he's becoming angry, he's becoming disappointed, and he displays that through his words. And then when Twilight tries to calm him down, he can have a more emotional line of "You're not my mother." He can yell it. He can have tears coming down his face. You could have such an emotional scene there. And the episode completely flounders on this idea. But again, it gets even worse, and I know how to make it even better this episode. So, following this episode's formula, Spike would storm off, and Smolder can still have the same attitude that she had in this episode, which is comforting Spike while also trying to understand why Spike's father is, behaving differently and trying to get under that development and calming Spike down as well, which could actually also develop Smolder as a character even further on top of her just not being there to say, "Oh, this is going to be the ploy we, put together." Again, you could do a little bit more with Smolder here, even in this episode. Have her be a voice of reason within the episode. But again, it continues. From there, so when Spike has calmed down, he goes to his father and he actually listens. And this episode does have a song where the fake father sings about how this is how you should live the life. This is dragon life, essentially. This is essentially what the song is about. Here's where I'm going to bring back that subtlety. You can have Spike's true father instead sing about forgiveness. Sing about, having to be a leader of a dragon clutch. Sing about all of it in this, very passionate, very emotional song. Very akin to, say, the song from Rah Rah at the end of her episode, or the subtle reference I would be akin to making Spike's song when he sung about the changeling thorax before he had changed. That way, you could have a reference, you could have a much better song sung so emotionally. You could have the background completely covered in darkness around the character, representing this loneliness, this sort of foreboding emotion, and then the emotion behind the background can amplify the song even further. And sure, Spike's song had this sort of light shining down on him. I don't know if I think that element of that particular song could have been removed, and it actually would have made the song actually even better if the light were removed. But nonetheless, you could have Spike's father just absolutely sing out about this, and actually having it all come together. And after hearing everything, you can have Spike reach such an emotional level, again, we have not really seen before. Have him just completely sobbing or something, an emotion that we've seen very briefly in one episode. It was the one he had the fear of losing Twilight to begin with. We saw him get a little bit emotional, but again, you could bring that back and amplify it here by the end of the song. And you could have them come to some sort of agreement, and then afterwards, just like in this episode, you could have Spike apologize to Twilight for what he had said, and instead of saying, "I want to drop dragon culture completely," you can change the moral completely by saying, "Well, I don't want to drop it completely. I mean, I don't want to take on the bad behaviors of the dragons, obviously, but I do want to continue to learn the good practices within dragon culture." That's a much better moral objectively. It just is. And again, this episode completely misses that mark. It fails on every part because the core question comes down to something so simple. And the moral, again, it feels so misplaced. It feels so like you're talking about completely dropping a culture that, again, it just doesn't feel right coming from someone who, not by my own volition, our own volitions, but we have dropped our cultures and we feel guilty and bad about that. That's not a good feeling to have. And Spike just kind of, it feels like he just spat all over dragon culture completely, 100%. And it shouldn't be 100%. Again, that is where the episode fails at its most, is that it doesn't, I don't think it fully understood what the moral was saying within the writing. The writing suggests that he dropped dragon culture completely. And again, I think that's just wrong. That's not a good moral. This episode is bad. It's not good. And we know, we've looked, that this is the last episode before the season finale, and it's not a good episode to leave off on before the season finale. This should have come before, if it were to be the exact same way it was before the Karen episode. That episode would have been a much stronger episode to get prepped up for the season finale for. But the way this episode is presented from beginning to end, it is just a spit in the face for everyone who wanted to see Spike's true father. It's a spit in the face to those who wanted to see a good moral about culture. It's a spit in the face to a new, developing Smolder even further, because she barely gets to do anything in this episode except say, hey, let's make a plan. There was so much potential here. And it becomes Spike's most disappointing episode. It becomes Spike's worst episode because this is season 8. This should not be happening. This is pathetic. And the writers, whoever wrote this episode, needs to take some time to write. Needs some time to clearly practice from execution, from the actual setup of the entire story. Every part of this fails on every level. There's nothing good here. Not even the song. It's just not good. This was extremely disappointing, considering that we considered Spike the best written character from the past few seasons. He was far beyond written better than most other characters for from season, I want to say 4-ish to 5-ish, all the way up to season 8 until this episode. That's a long run of good Spike episodes, and it's so disappointing to see it crash and burn here. It is just so disappointing. But we don't want to leave this here. We want to start something new, because on our main channel we created a hashtag, bring the community tab back. But we're not going to end it there. We're going to start a new challenge on this channel as well. If we are opening a open invitational to this review, if you think you can counter or agree with, either way, with this video, then again, we are creating an open invitational. This is something that no other Bony analyst will ever do, and I am saying this now. No one has ever done it, and no one is currently doing this. We are. Because we are pushing for something new, for something better to come along. The Brony analysis community has been plagued with terrible decisions and lots of drama, and has been so exclusive for far too long. My Little Pony is coming to an end in Season 9. No shocker there. Season 8, again, has been for the most part terrible. But for the last season, we are going to try to push for this. From this review to the next 2-in-1 review, since it'll probably be a two-parter, from all of Season 9, we're going to push for new content creators, even if they only get that little last bit. We're going to push for new. We're going to push for something greater here on YouTube. Far better than this episode will ever do. Far better than any other Brony analysis person will ever do, has ever done in the past. Hopefully in the future this will change, but as of right now, it has been failure after failure after failure, and I am sick and tired of it. It is time for a change here on YouTube, and it starts now. But that is our review of Father Knows Beast. More so a rant than a review, but still, nonetheless, this episode was terrible. There's nothing good here. Stek tot tang ton tori. But if you enjoyed this review / rant, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, everyone, farewell. Bye-bye.